All right, welcome everyone. My name is Jonathan Eisler. I'm the Vice President of Organizational Consulting at Perspectives. If you joined us for last week's session on leading remote teams, I'd like to welcome you back. If this is your first time joining us, I want to welcome you to our ongoing series where we're focused on supporting the business community during these uncertain times by sharing at no cost the services that our consulting group has seen in a high demand right now to help organizations battle this ever-changing environment that we find ourselves working in. Most of us have participated in or led a virtual meeting before, right? Whether it's work-related or even just checking in with family and friends on something like FaceTime or Skype or some other platform. So this way of interacting with others is not something new. In fact, at the end of 2019, a survey was done that said or found more than half of working professionals had participated in a virtual meeting, and 56% of CFOs had planned on investing in a virtual meeting platform for their organization. Now, fast forward a few months to where we find ourselves today and the way that the workforce is looking right now, given the current pandemic, and I think it's safe to say that 100% of businesses are, or very soon will be, incorporating virtual meetings into daily operations. Now, from accessibility to cost to inclusion, there's lots of cost-saving benefit, or lots of benefits, I should say, to virtual meetings. However, whether you're a pro or whether you're even just new and starting out and leading some of your first virtual meetings here, there's plenty of challenges as well. So the good news is that today we have one of our lead consultants, Jill Hendricks, who will be sharing a condensed version of Perspectives Organizational Consulting Group's virtual workshop that is called Top 10 Tips to Run an Effective Virtual Meeting. Now, I hope that all of you will stay tuned at the very end. I want to just give a little preview about what we will be offering next week in our free virtual workshop series. So without further ado, and to make the best use of our time, let me turn it over to Jill. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. I am going to share my screen. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation to go over as we move through this content. So again, thank you all for making time today, and we want to get right to it because I know your time is extremely valuable. And just like Jonathan said, this is definitely a condensed version. We're trying to pack as much content and information into this as possible. But if you want to dive deeper, we can talk more about that. So, all right, so top 10 tips. I know it's called top 10 tips, but I couldn't help to kind of go beyond that. So it might be a little bit more than 10. So why are we here? I want to go through a process that will keep you focused on creating clarity, connection, candor, commitment, and co-creation as you engage and take a step up. I think we've all noticed during this time of crisis and high stress, and on top of the fact of being isolated and having to have everything be virtual and remote, is we have to kind of step everything up to a certain level. So a lot of this information might not be new, but I think it's really good to just make sure that we're taking a little extra time as things are just a little bit harder and a little bit more stressful to make sure we're really being intentional and strategic as we take part in these more virtual and remote meetings. And the outcome that I want to create is that you have actual hands-on takeaways to maximize your engagement no matter what platform you use. So we're using Zoom. I know some organizations use WebEx or Google Hangouts or Microsoft Teams, multiple platforms. So this, again, if you were here last week, the approach is participative. We want you to use that chat feature. If you have questions that you want answered in this session today, use the Q&A feature. Jonathan and our Perspectives administrator will be online reviewing chat, reviewing Q&A to make sure that we are fully engaging your voice throughout this process. Like I said, I went a little bit over 10 tips. So what we did is we condensed it into this 5C model. And this 5C model to design a conversation has tips integrated into each C. So that's clarity, connection, candor, co-creation, and commitment is what we're going to talk about today. So we're only here for 30 minutes. I know that it's the nature of the time right now to feel so distracted. If you're like me, I have a 2-year-old who's home. We have a 12-year-old who's on spring break. My partner's working from home. There's so many distractions. Email is going crazy. Everything is higher level stress. So give yourself the gift right now to really be present. And, use this, I'm standing, use this as a standing break or a stretching break, but make sure, even if you're thinking, oh, I can do the dishes or do some laundry while I listen to this webinar, give yourself the gift of really being present and taking time to learn and engage with this content today. And again, just chat in or Q&A. So let's get started. I want everybody to just take a minute, take 30 seconds. I guess I used the colloquial minute here, but what I meant was let's just take 30 seconds and think of the last time you walked away from a virtual meeting or working session and felt truly motivated to move forward with the action items agreed upon, or enthusiastic about working collaboratively with that group remotely. I want you to think about what made it motivating or actionable. I want you to come up with 3 things, and in 30 seconds, I want you to chat in one thing about that group virtual session that made it motivating. So just take a minute, give yourself the gift of presence. It's so easy to just get distracted right now, but really think. I want you to actually engage with this content.
So we've got a few coming in here, Jill. I'll just go ahead and read these, some of these as they're coming in. One said it ended early, and so it gave everybody a short list of to-dos. Connected with work that I'm doing. Physically seeing my coworkers was exciting to stay motivated on current projects. From everybody sharing their ideas, it wasn't just about the facilitator or the trainer. I felt like I was part of the discussion, just wasn't spoken to.
That's great.
Others, it was something relatable that I could implement right away. There's a number of comments coming in about the connectedness that it enabled, regardless of where people were geographically here too. Absolutely. Even personally, and I think I mentioned this briefly last week, we've even found that while a number of our teams are out in the field, especially serving our customers and our clients, both on our employee assistance program side and on the consulting side, since we've all now been mandated to work virtually, or 100% of us have, it's actually increased the cohesion that we feel across the company and across divisions. So we've actually even seen some of those silos start to break down as well.
I love that. Awesome.
And also, just sorry to interrupt, these comments and stuff will be recorded though too, and so there will be follow-up coming for everybody that signed on today. And I know there's been some questions too about getting access to the recording. That will be coming afterwards, as well as some other resources around this. So thanks for all these comments, guys. Keep them coming in.
Yeah, please keep coming in. Even if throughout this presentation you remember something, please chat it in. We want your full participation. All right. So I'm happy to say that everything you guys just shared in your chat-ins actually aligns very nicely with this 5C model for powerful group conversations. And this is a model that can be used even once things go back to us being able to return to our physical workspaces and be co-located again. However, I've adapted this more for the remote situation. And, I think you've noticed that this is really a time for us to step up and be more intentional, be more strategic. So the more time you take to build this habit now, the more natural and proficient you're going to be. And you're going to bring that tool in to the next phase when we can be co-located again. And you're going to be such a powerful meeting designer and meeting facilitator. So let's get started. What are the 5 C's? The 5 C's stand for clarity, connection, candor, co-creation, and commitment. And you can see on the screen, there's a little diamond, and it represents the time that we should be investing in our meeting, in the way we design our meeting for each of these things. So the clarity is the tippy point. It doesn't take long to get clear on what's our purpose and what's our outcome. Why are we here and what are we trying to produce in order to move forward? So I start every single one of my meetings with a purpose and outcome. And anytime I put a meeting invite out there, in the event details of that calendar invite, I include the purpose and outcome. These are healthy habits to get into, especially right now when we're feeling so distracted. We might feel like we're juggling so many different things. To get really clear and intentional with our participants to support them in engagement and even to support you with being strategic. So like our participant mentioned, we can end early, if not on time. How much of a gift is that when we end earlier on time? So the next step is to build connection. And somebody mentioned the power of that connection, feeling engaged, feeling like they're part of that group. Jonathan mentioned that silos are breaking down. So really getting clear on what do we need to do for connection. My connection for this webinar was to ask you all to take a moment and to reflect for yourselves on what made meetings engaging and powerful. And it might be different depending on the meeting. You want to think about, why are we here? What are our existing relationships? What kind of conversation do we need to have in order to get real and to have candor and to feel safe in being candid so that we can create commitments around that? We're going to go deeper into all of this. Candor is about relevant information so we make good decisions. So that's either preparing data or information or working as a pre-group and assigning pre-work so that everybody's prepared with the relevant information that they need. And then co-creation is about engaging and collaborating to determine the next steps. And then commitment is those smart actions. How can we be specific, measurable, relevant, and timely on what we're going to do next to move forward? So let's get into these 5 C's very quickly. So the top 3 tips for clarity in order to determine a purpose and an outcome is to define your objective and create an agenda based on the 5 C's in order to achieve that outcome that you're driving towards. So you want to design your agenda so that you have prepared the right questions, included the right people, the right stakeholders, and you have thought through what pre-work or what information is necessary in order to build the right commitment. So your job as a meeting facilitator or as a leader who is driving this project forward or this group working session forward is to get really clear on your purpose and outcome and make sure your objectives are clear. That's the most important thing for clarity. Here's an example of a very simple sample clarity statement. Purpose: to understand the cost-saving opportunities for our profit and loss statement, for our profit and loss situation. Our outcome is that we want to have a list of saving opportunities that best align our business needs. It's very simple, but just setting that intention of our purpose and outcome, I bet in your heads you already know what the candor and the co-creation looks like. The candor might be a couple of your people on your finance team presenting different P&Ls, presenting different types of information so that the leadership and the corporate teams might be able to look and think about it strategically. And then the co-creation piece might look like you guys brainstorming different opportunities and what you see from your different perspectives, right? So even just getting clear on that purpose and outcome, all of a sudden, the rest of that meeting design starts to fall together, doesn't it? So let's get next, after then clarity, it's just those 2 statements. That's the clarity statement, comes connection. So the connection tip is about creating a relationship. Somebody chatted in that they didn't even need to participate in order to feel included in the group and engaged in the meeting. That's a really powerful participation. So I appreciate that chat in, because right now, especially during this COVID-19 situation, we are all experiencing heightened level of stress and anxiety. that's very normal and yet can be very a little off-putting for us if we're used to our routine or we're used to our modus operandi. So it's really important right now more than ever to build time into your meeting design for connection. So you want to acknowledge the whole person or acknowledge people right now more than ever. So taking time after your clarity statement to say, how are you guys doing? What's one thing you've done to stay engaged? What's one thing you've done to laugh or smile this week? Whatever it is, think of some question, some icebreaker, some way to get people engaged right away, participating right away, and feeling connected with you in their relationship. So again, you also want to make sure in this connection that you're preparing agreements and approach. So even in this webinar, I said, hey, our approach is participative and our agreements are to be present. And I set that as an approach and agreement right off the bat. So don't be afraid to set the standard and let them know what your expectations are for that meeting. So let's just take a quick break here. Jonathan, any questions coming in before we move on to candor, the next step in the 5C model?
Yes, we have a question from an old friend of Perspectives. Pat, good to see you. What is meant by language for conversation? Maybe an example or something you could share.
Absolutely. It's interesting. Every organization has a language, and you don't really think about it if you're in deep with that conversation. So just for example, the other day, our VP of operations asked us to put together a very specific COVID-19 training for our leaders. And she asked us to mandate that leaders are having very specific types of beginning of shift huddles. And she used the term huddle. But what she didn't kind of put together, because it's such a different situation now with COVID-19, is that prior in our ops playbook, a lot of the operational playbook that we do in terms of habit building with our leadership, just as a general model, is we use the term stand up. So it was very interesting from a training point of view. I said, hey, you know, I'm noticing you're using the term huddle. Do you want us to use huddle or do you want us to use stand up? And it made a lot of sense to, one, stay cohesive with our language of stand up, but two, especially in this environment of social distancing, the word huddle connotes closeness that we don't want to encourage. So even as a leader, you know, sometimes you might come from a different corporation or have a different background. You want to be cognizant that you're using the language of the culture, the language of the time, right? We want to be conscious if I use the word huddle, does that mean that people might subconsciously huddle together and not use appropriate social distancing protocol? Or should we use the word term stand up and be specific, make sure that your voice is projecting and people are people are standing up and using an appropriate social distance? That's just a quick example. Does that, Jonathan, do you feel that that answers the question? Can you think of a better example?
I think that was a great one. And so did our friend that asked the question. So nicely done.
Okay, good. Excellent. So being clear on language. And I also, from a coaching perspective, mirroring language is really important in time of stress. So even if you're just having a one-on-one conversation with an employee who is extra anxious, extra stressed, mirror their language. It's going to help them feel very comfortable. So for example, if I go to Jonathan and I'm like, Jonathan, man, I just feel like I'm in the middle of a hurricane. And he's like, yeah, the hurricane has really strong winds right now, Jill, but I've seen you be strong and even a stronger wind and stronger rain. You know, if he goes along with my metaphor and he mirrors that language, that's instantly going to make me feel connected to him. So that's just a coaching tip too. Okay, good questions. I love this engagement. Excellent. Okay, So now we have created clarity, we have created connection, and now is the time for candor. And you can't get to candor unless your group and the people in the conversation feel psychologically safe. So again, in the time of candor is the time to get all of the information on the table. So as we know, in order to operate effectively and make good decisions, we need all of the best information on the table. And the only way to receive that information is if we feel safe to be open and candid about what's really going on right now. So connect to the purpose, come from an appreciative approach, set the standard and say, listen, I know there's a lot going on. And Jonathan and I have talked that too. Maybe you just need to set aside in that connection time to just vent out any of that, what we call mental trash. Let's just take 5 minutes and vent out that mental trash, because I really want you guys to think solution focused and possibility focused in this meeting right now. And the most important thing for candor is to allow time for listening and comprehending and understanding. So the biggest mistake that can be made is if, say, we're going along with that P&L example, if you have 3 P&L statements that you want to go through, you got to make sure that you have enough time to really look and comprehend and understand that information in order to make the best decisions about cost-saving outcomes. Be inclusive. A lot of times as a facilitator, I'll use a term called roundtable, and I'll do forced participation, forced include. That sounds a bit. I'll do kind of more. They call it aggressive inclusion, where I'm like, okay, everybody is gonna go around. We're gonna do a roundtable, and everybody will say one thing that they've learned from this information, or one piece of information that they want to share about this P&L. And then having working agreements, making sure that everybody is clear about what to expect and what to agree on. So everybody has their video on. Everybody's going to participate. Everybody's going to turn their phones off and try to be in a quiet place for this half-hour meeting, something like that. Those are examples. Actually, here are some more examples. You can have agreements around systems you're going to use. So when this whole COVID-19 thing happened, WebEx is a little expensive. So our IT department actually said, okay, during this time, since we're going to be upping our virtual meetings, we want you to use Google Hangouts as a cost-saving initiative. So having that agreement that this meeting is going to be on Google Hangouts, even though we normally meet on WebEx. Meeting protocols, we want you guys to be on video to produce engagement. Process, make sure people understand work quality. It's okay to say, hey, we're running fast and loose, so your normal work quality is 100%. I needed you to ratchet it down to 80, but I need it faster. I need the turnaround time to increase, and maybe the work quality goes down a little bit. And that's just an example about how you guys want to work. And then just making sure that you're clear on the cultural working agreements that are sometimes can be misinterpreted, especially virtually. So if you say okay instead of okay with a smiley face, then you might think, oh, she's mad or something. So just making it okay to use emojis, even though that might not be interpreted as professional in a normal corporate situation. So I'm going really fast, but again, we can dive deeper into some of this. Some more candor tips. What does information include, right? We all know to include data and PowerPoint presentations, but we want to think a little bit deeper in terms of what are any assumptions that could be there. So sometimes saying, okay, we're having a meeting about P&L, but are we including all of the holistic stakeholders that need to be there in terms of ops and sales and customer care? And really making sure all of those assumptions or biases, our values from different perspectives, different silos, as Jonathan said earlier, are being included in the candor portion. The candor is the biggest part of that diamond, the most wide part. We want to make the most time for that. And then that moves us on to, once we have fully engaged in candor, then we can shift into co-create. Co-create is about getting all of the voices on the table to go from current to future. So a lot of times I like to say, based on what we know now, right? We just had this candor moment where we all gave information, we all gave assumptions, we all gave values, we all gave intentions. Now what do we do with that? We know new information now. Where do we go from here? What needs to change? What are the top 3 things that need to change? Or what are some brainstorming ideas that we can brainstorm and prioritize those based on everybody's vision and perspective? So co-create is a time to really collaborate, engage all voices. And then finally, I'm going fast again, you gotta forgive me. The last C is commitment. So we have got clarity, we've got connection, we have candor, we have co-creation, we have everything, we know what we need to do, and there's all of this energy around it, and we need to, as meeting facilitators, we need to make sure that we're being very specific. Now more than ever in these remote meetings, people are gonna get off that meeting and they're gonna be home. They're gonna turn around to a toddler, they're gonna turn around to a teen, and they need to know specifically, measurably, achievably, and timely, what are they doing? What does success look like? What resources do they have? When do they need it by? X by Y. What do they need to do by when? And that is commitment. So you should end every meeting with, Jonathan, this is what you're gonna do. I need it by tomorrow. Kelly, this is what you're gonna do. I need it by Saturday, or whatever it is. So being very clear in your commitments at the end. So we are gonna put together, with all of your amazing insights, a toolkit that can help you design your own 5C meeting. And again, this is a great time to just take a little extra time to make sure you're ramping up, stepping up your meeting designs, because it's harder remotely to run these meetings effectively on time and with maximum engagement. So you guys are going to be pros. The good news out of this is we are going to get out of this together stronger and better than ever. So take this toolkit with you and build this habit, build this proficiency, so that once you're back in face-to-face co-located environments, you're going to rock these meeting designs. So continue to prepare and practice, continue to reflect and reinforce this information, and continue to implement the learning into that 5C model toolkit. So let's just wrap up really quickly. We don't have a lot of time. We have 2 minutes. I want to hear, what are you taking away? This is my commitment, right? What are you walking away with? And what will you implement by when? This is my X by Y. I'm following my own model. So tell us, what are you walking away with? What will you implement, and when will you implement it? One thing, just one thing.
And I will share these as they come in. And also, just in case anyone's wondering, I'm looking up because my screen is up here where I'm actually watching all the conversations as they're coming in here. Let me see. Looks like the chat feature's thinking a little bit. So while the chat feature is spinning right now, I'm going to go ahead and assume that that's because there's so many great comments coming in here. And I will say this, because I want to be conscious of everyone's time. As Jill said, we will be following up with everybody that was able to attend today, as well as those that registered and that for some reason weren't able to attend, but not only with the recording to today's session, but as well as this toolkit that we will then create based off of this feedback that all of you have shared, and that my attendees and within our community. In the full session, we spend a little bit more time co-creating specific agreements, some of the things that Jill talked about. and make it specific for organizations, for your culture, for your team dynamics, etc. So next week, if you're able to, please tune in for our session where we're going to be hearing from one of our executive coaches. That's a retired infantry officer, and he's also a graduate of the Army's Ranger School. He's going to talk about ways that we should and can lead through a crisis. So stay tuned for all the follow-up material. Want to thank everybody for participating today, and look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.